Welcome back, beautiful superstars, where we are having conversations around decluttering your mind, decluttering your home. And one of the biggest things that comes up is, most of the women that I work with are moms. And so they're like, I know I need to work on my closet. I know I need to work on my health and my stress. But like, if you could help me with my kids, I feel like we would kind of fast track all of this healing. And so I'm so grateful and excited to have one of my dear friends and one of the most knowledgeable people on the planet, Dr. Sandy Ziya. And if you're wondering where her tan is from, she's in Southern Florida. So
Yay.
we're we're going to
Yay.
talk about what it means to really feel empowered as a parent for your children, especially when it comes to their health and especially when it comes to their health care and their providers. So I'm excited to just kind of dive in because Dr. Z is going to share some amazing things. And I also just felt intuitively wanting to share too, like she's in South Florida. So if you're in a different part of the world or the country and you've always wanted to see like a doctor that I love and trust more than anybody, and you want to also squeeze in a vacation while you're at it, like the opportunity is there.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Boondoggle the whole thing.
Yes.
Great idea.
Yeah. So if you want to share a little bit about your background and just the conversation we even had the other day where you're like, I've been helping adults with XYZ my whole career, but people are now wanting me to see their kids, and then just kind of sharing a little bit about what that journey's been like for you professionally and as a mom of four.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I love this. I get very, very excited when I can talk in any length about functional medicine. And I think you've heard me say before, but I'll share with people that are listening to me maybe for the first time that I get most passionate about my fringe aged patients, the
Mm.
people on the younger end of the spectrum and the older. And the reason that I do, Fallon, is that I feel like they can be most taken advantage of. They're most compromised, right?
Yeah.
They have the young can't vote for themselves, right? They have no agency whatsoever. They don't have insurance, they don't have credit cards. They are completely at the mercy of our system and or their parents. And then the elderly, on the other hand, are very much the same. And additionally, the elderly have all kinds of mental and physical fatigue, right? And one of the things that's different about those two is that typically the child has some representative with them. They're not taking themselves to the doctor, right? A
Right.
lot of times our elderly are going by themselves. So that's why those two demographics really get me very passionate about representation for them because I feel like they're most at risk. So my background, I've been a parent longer than I've been a doctor. So I think that's really important to share that I am a four-time mom and my children are now adults. So I always tell people that ask me about how many kids I have or how old they are. I always tell them that I have four kids, and then that's followed with I made it. Like it's such a huge accomplishment, and when you see all of the trials and tribulations of raising children and creating loving, competent adults, it's a giant task, possibly the most important task that we have. And it's completely underappreciated. So I've been a a mother for now 25 years. I'm going into my sixth year in functional medicine. And just to be clear on what my definition of functional medicine is, it's essentially root cause conversations as well as what can we do to minimize the amount of high risk interventions that come with potential side effects and don't have long-term solutions and or exit strategies. And that is really to me what's important and unique in my practice because in standard care or in conventional care, it's a very, very different conversation. The conversation is very much, well, here's what we're going to do for you. It's kind of a cookie cutter approach, and we're going to rubber stamp you like we do for everybody else. And at the end of the day, there's no stepping off. You get on and you're really not getting off. And then as a corollary to that, you also don't have a conversation about informed consent. And that's a serious problem, again, for all the demographics.
Right.
But what happens now shifting into pediatric care, what happens specifically in pediatrics is, as a parent, as a new parent and a young parent, you're fatigued, you're exhausted, and you are trying to do what's best for your child, and you don't have a whole lot of bandwidth to go into deep research on any particular thing. And that's with one child. And if you have more than one child, you're even more compromised on time, right? So what do? We show up at the doctor's office, and we show up and we feel like we should intuitively trust someone who comes in with all their diplomas on the wall and a white coat saying, here's what we do, here's what's standard practice, therefore, here's what we're going to do for your child. So that's the setup. And I know it well as a mom, because that's exactly what was presented to me. And I had done some research, but everything that I had researched was basically representative of one voice. Now cut to today. There's this term that's being thrown around, MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. Now, I don't know what's going to come of that. If my Christmas list could delineate what I want to manifest from MAHA, I would probably get about 30 things on that list, Fallon.
Hell yeah, the longer the better.
Exactly. There's so much on there, like transparency and labeling, fluoridating our water, over drugging our children, natural remedies for our kids, removing dyes and chemicals from our food system, overhauling our lunch program or removing it. If you can't make it better, then remove it from the school system, because it's so compromised. It's making our kids really sick. So I'm very, very excited about MAHA, but we also have to say, well, going back to what I was talking about with agency, we also have to use our own agency and say, okay, this is pie in the sky stuff, and this is really important, and it's awesome. And whenever I have an opportunity to talk to legislators or, vote, those are the kinds of things that I want to push forward. But in our own world, or in our own reality, there's a lot of agency that we do have. And I think part of what's happening now, at least in my practice and possibly in some other doctors' practice, is that they are also now starting to observe that parents are like, well, maybe there's another option. My kid is not actually getting better, as you suggested. My kid is the same and or worse. And another reason that I get so passionate about these kids is that if we have that conversation, let's say for the sake of this discussion, with a 5-year-old child, and then we put them on a trajectory of never taking a dive into how we can use some of these natural remedies and get them on a sustainable pathway for long-term health, what's going to happen to them is not what happened in the previous generation. It's amplified, and it's going to get worse. One example of that is colon health. Colonoscopy, no one was ever talking about colon health or colon risk or colonoscopy for anybody under 50. Well, now the guidelines are changing, and they're like, well, you know what? We're seeing a lot of colon problems with younger people, Therefore, we're going to have to slide the date for having that intervention for our kids to go in and scope the colon to look for things like tumors, growth, and cancer. My response to that is not enough. We are not going to wait for cancers, continuing what we're doing, having those kinds of maladies and disease states in our children, normalize that, and then go do a diagnostic to acknowledge what's there. That to me is a fool's errand. What needs to happen is going back to how our inputs created that environment. And that is what is striking in today's conversation, because it's not happening. No one's having these conversations. And yes, with what I do in my functional medicine practice, I'm doing it, but somehow we need to get the word out. And this is one of the ways that we can do that. And, and that we can certainly spitball some other ideas of how we can offer this as support to our parents. Because again, you go in to a doctor's office with a baby who's been up all night and crying, and you're trying to do a side hustle or a part-time job, get dinner on the table, and all the other duties of being a parent. And the next thing you know, your kid is sicker or worse. And it's not that these parents aren't well-intentioned. That's not the case. It's that the system is not going to support them. And even if they do ask the right questions, I've had this experience as a physician asking these questions to other doctors that they've referred me to, even with an astute posture of questions and conversations. There's no space for it in that setting. And that's a problem. So parents are starting to realize that that's not okay. That's not okay. And by the way, there are options. That right there is really exciting. And that's where I think we have a lot of opportunities to heal these children and support the parents. And the fun fact is, a lot of this stuff is free. You and I have talked about this a lot. A lot of the things that, I'm promoting in these families' lives are free. And maybe they've heard about it a little bit, but they're not using it as prescriptive. And when I present it to them as prescriptive care with dose-specific instructions, things start to change. And then the child starts doing things that are natural to being a child. And now the entire dynamic starts to shift. And the beauty of it is it doesn't take that long, and it doesn't take a lot of money. Again, I would love it if our government would change our health system and give each family $1,000 a year for functional medicine, health coaching, all these beautiful things, HSA for families, any kind of help whatsoever. But even in the interim, even without that, I can delineate for you how much money you're spending in the system with insurance care, going to doctors, and not getting better. But we've been trained, right, and deluded into this notion that because you have insurance, you're only paying this amount of money, but the outcome is never clear, which I am presenting that what you're getting from that is a byproduct of a reimbursement program. That's all that is. That's really all it is, Fallon. That is not a health model. It is a reimbursement model. Do this, here's how you get reimbursed or paid a portion up to your copay or deductible or whatever. max lifetime or whatever. That is the model. And if there's one thing I want your listeners to take away from today, that's what you get. There is no health conferred as a product of that. The good news is, like I said before, we don't just have to hang our heads and go, okay, well, I'm just throw my hands up because I got to live with that because that's what the program is and that's what I'm paying in for. No, we absolutely have agency, right? We can move our money around on our own. We can designate how we spend our money. We can designate how much we're allocating to covered insurance. Now is a great time of year to be talking about this, Fallon. In fact, I'm
Yeah.
doing it for my own benefit. What are the kinds of health metrics I need to do for next year? Where am I at vis-a-vis from last year? And these are conversations that we all need to be having with ourselves. But then again, as parents, we also need to be looking at our children and observing their behavior. I mean, what is a well check? A mom takes a kid, that's primarily the mom, but dads too, takes the child to the pediatrician for a well check. I mean, that's really just code for drugs and vaccines. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
Like, here's where you're at. Here's what the guides say. So here's what the kid needs to be taking. As as parents, if your kid is thriving. And that does not come in a pediatrician's office. You are managing their care and their ability to thrive by the choices that you make at home and the environment that you give them. And we can unpack like what are some of the things that I'm referring to. But if we think that showing up, and again, I was this victim too, that showing up at the pediatrician's office with this notion that I'm doing the right thing because I'm bringing this child in for a well visit and, they're getting perforated with needles and weighed and, maybe a heart rate taken. And then I'm off to the races until the next 3 months or whatever it is. That's insufficient at best. And we as parents can do more.
And I can use myself as an example. I think I was my 2-year checkup, maybe age 3. And my pediatrician, who I really did like, he was a, quote unquote good person, right? But he just like looked at my parents. He's like, oh yeah, she has ADHD. She'll have it her whole life. We're not going to do medication, like learn how to deal with it. And then multiple strep infections to the point where like I would be in tears because swallowing was so painful. And then when I had a really bad bout of Epstein-Barr virus when I was 15, which also looked and felt like the flu. Yeah. All 3 of those things were such severe issues that showed up on lab work 15 years later. Wow. And if we had actually addressed them properly, which back then and still now, I would love to hear your explain kind of antibiotics in a way that, lay people can understand, because I'm not good at that. But that's basically what they did for all of those quote unquote infections. And, just led me down a really bad path because my brain was literally not functioning because my gut was not functioning.
Wow. And that was someone that was a decent pediatrician.
Yeah. He was like, I'll do whatever you want. But like, again, like my parents didn't have the time and the research ability. They didn't know what they were doing.
Right. Exactly. And, up until I think the last few years, a certain pandemic kind of blew the lid off of this trust the science. Mm-hmm. I don't think blind trusting anything is really a good idea. And I think this is maybe nugget number 2 takeaway. If we're going to say there's 1 or 2 nuggets that I'm going to take away, because I don't remember everything that she said, but boy, I want to make sure that I resonate with this. It's if you approach a doctor, whatever kind of doctor you're going to, a specialist, a generalist, an alternative doctor, whatever, if you cannot have a dialogue, if it's a monologue, this is what we do, this is what we always do, this is how it's done, you need to leave. Because that is always going to be subpar care. As a doctor who does that, you're hitting easy button because this is just what we were always taught or trained to do. And I don't have to do any additional work to manage you as an individual. And that's where the rubber meets the road. As soon as you get that kind of feedback, that is emblematic of someone that you don't want to work with, because we should not be rubber stamped for any. I mean, what can you think of that we should be rubber stamped for? Nothing, nothing. We're snowflakes, right? All of us are very individual. There, I did that for the holiday season. We're all snowflakes. We're all individual, and we should be treated and cared for as such. And we want someone to lean in and hear about our unique presentation. And that power, that agency to the patients is something that I pride my own practice on, but want to share that people need to be warned that not everyone out there is like that for all kinds of reasons we don't need to waste time discussing. But if that's the case, you just politely get up and leave, because you're just not going to get the best care.
Yeah. And I also want to share too that when it comes to pediatricians and family medicine doctors, they're typically the most open-minded into the stuff that you and I are into, for the most part. Not always,
Right.
but for the most part. And one of the biggest beautiful lessons that I learned when I was doing intakes was, we always required to meet with a patient alone, no matter their age, no matter their, cognitive abilities. And when I would meet with the kids, they would so clearly understand, like, these are 5-year-olds who are getting brain scans. And they're like, yeah, I've heard I'm going to get this brain scan. I'm really excited. I can't wait to tell my friends at school about my brain. And I'm like, what is your goal for being here? And 9 times out of 10, it would be, I want to be a better brother. I want to be a better sister. Like, this is not the stuff that you would think is going to come out of their sweet little mouths.
No.
But their motivation is so different because no one's asking them that, right?
Right.
And we know kids know what they want. They know what they want to wear. They know what they want to eat. They're very discerning.
Yes.
It's because they're intuitive and they're literally a child. So they're living their cute little divine child life. When we actually just ask these kids too, like, hey, what would motivate you to feel better? And, do you notice a difference when, we're giving you these pills when you're having your sore throat? Like, if someone had asked me, I would have said, like, it makes me feel more scared, because it did, because of now knowing what I know about antibiotics and how they ruin serotonin. As someone who, has a family that nobody's doing anything for their serotonin, it made sense that it made me more sad. It made me feel more scared. And if we had just been like, hey, can we have another conversation? Like, is there anything else that we can do that doesn't make me feel sad or scared in my little girl language? That is such a powerful thing too, that I think is so important for parents to know. It's like, some of these kids know what they want to feel, and they know what makes sense to them. And it's not, no kid is intuitively going to be like, yes, give me all these medications. Not one kid. When they tune in to their little selves and they're like, yeah, I feel like there has to be something different. I know I always feel better on Mondays because I got to be outside and play all weekend with my friends, getting sunshine, feet on the earth,
there you go.
Being social, and having mom remind me, like, make sure you're staying hydrated and drinking your water. Oh, that makes sense why his behavior is actually much better on Mondays than it is on Fridays, because now that I'm thinking about it, he has access to all of these free healing practices. So I think it's really important to never underestimate, like, their little language and like what they're sharing with you as far as what they want to be experiencing and what just makes sense to them.
Because
they know.
Exactly. And give them the opportunity to communicate and emote. And that goes back to my coaching years of coaching kids for so long. Like, you have to talk to them directly, and give them that opportunity, and establishing that trust with the child is where you get real gains. So that's, that's the challenge as a doctor working in pediatrics, is that you have to challenge, or you have to both have a relationship with the parent and the child,
Yeah.
right? And they're not mutually exclusive. Obviously, the parent is important, because the parent is the one that, is asking for the help with the child, and is the one that made the conversation and the connection even possible. So that's important there. But at the end of the day, if the child doesn't have a trusting relationship with you as the doctor and accepts that, then that's going to be a problem, because now the route of healing is mostly directed to someone who's not the patient, right? And now we're having a different conversation, Fallon. Now we're really having a business conversation. Okay. And that's not okay in pediatrics. At least it's not to me. You've got to spend equal time talking to the child. And when I have parents bring their kids here, I tell them, I say, listen, I'm going to now talk to your child and ask some questions. And, if you would indulge us and let us have this conversation without interruptions. If we need you for fact checking or whatever, we'll do that. But let me now have this conversation with this child. Now, going into one of the beautiful things of functional medicine, again, my definition, maybe not everybody else's, is that it's not just all hard science. Okay. Trust heals. Mindfulness, mindset heals. There is I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's a double-digit increase in positive outcomes when you trust your provider. So now go back to the child and the parent in the room.
Yeah.
Okay. We as doctors have to do more and have to do better to connect with the child. Okay. Because we're primarily healing the child. The child is the patient. Now, notwithstanding, the mom may have anxiety and, all kinds of other issues of her own that then become transferent to the child. But the child is the root cause in that scenario. So if the child looks forward to our visits and the child feels comfortable and safe, soon as that child walks out the door, they're already healing. The healing is already in motion before they do any of the prescriptives that I've asked them to do.
Wasn't there some study that shows that, and I don't know if this is true, I think I heard it on like a rom-com, but like often kids, the biggest people that make the biggest impression on them are actually not their parents, but their parents' friends and their teachers and the other adults in their life. Have you heard that?
I have heard that.
Okay.
And that is incredibly powerful for us.
And especially when, because, we're on this road to, all doctors having to do ACEs assessments, which is adverse childhood experiences, to make sure that there isn't abuse or other things going on that we can't figure out because we're not alone with the child. That's a huge factor with the trust too. You think of, the one time that you told your mom, like, hey, I don't want to be left alone with this person in our family.
Yep.
And they don't listen. And we know how that story goes, right? It can be so much the same thing with, hey, mom, like, my vitamin D and my zinc are low. Like Dr. Ziya said, when we're getting to a week, we want to make sure we reorder it so it comes in time. Like, again, this whole ADD time management organization thing, I mean, that's the reason that I have the business that I have and why I love doing what I do. But when you start really paying attention to the things that matter, you don't forget things like that.
Correct.
You start to see the bottom of the pill barrel. You're like, oh shit, I need to make sure that I reorder these supplements, right?
Yep.
And there's just so many opportunities to allow our kids and our tweens and our teens to help with those things, because they need to be responsible too. You and I know we work with so many adults who their biggest complaint is, I can't remember to take all this stuff. And I'm like, well, that's why we need to train you younger to remember all these things.
Absolutely. And that kind of goes back to what I was kind of intimating about our parents.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get to choose our parents. I say that all the time, like we get what we get. But if I can establish, if our providers in pediatric care can establish that relationship with the child, then the child can then create their own agency.
Mhm.
Okay, so less dependency on mom and dad who are late for work all the time, working 80-hour weeks, um, don't have enough time to answer my questions, uh, sleep deprived, whatever, whatever. We can't control mom and dad. But if we have the opportunity to have these conversations directly with our children about the things that they can do, which quite frankly are a lot. I
Mhm.
mean, our kids are capable of packing their own lunches. Our kids are capable of doing their own homework, of getting their backpack ready, setting their clothes out. So it's just habit stacking. And I use that word a lot. Like, here are some more habits that we're going to add to your stacks of things that you do, and you can do them yourself. You can communicate, to mom and dad, like, Dr. Zia said, I need to spend some time outside. I haven't been outside the last couple days. I'm going to go outside. Tell them that you're doing that, but then the child is doing it on their own. It alleviates a lot of stress for the parent, and it gives the kid something that they're capable of doing, just like they do with all their activities and school and everything else. They're quite capable of doing it.
There's like kindergartners that know how to prepare their own food. They can use a hot plate or an oven. Like they know how to clean up after themselves. Like
Yeah.
it's just a
Yeah.
different reality
Yeah.
because of where we live. And if you're listening, you're probably in the US or Canada. And it's just a very, like, we really need to teach them these tools.
We do, because again, they've got nannies, they're latchkey kids where they're home alone, or their parents are distracted, and their parents may not be well either. Like,
Yeah,
the parents may be smoking and drinking. Like, we have no idea, but we don't necessarily need to repeat the cycle, do we? We
right.
can we can do better for these children. And that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. If we can set these kids in motion to not adopt this path of standard care dovetailed with, I'm going to do what my parents are doing, even if it's harmful, we can actually affect change for them that's going to get their longevity tables back in line, because our kids our kids are really sick right now. Our kids are getting sicker. We are one of the, if not the unhealthiest country. Our childhood epidemics are staggering and not getting better. It's shifting all kinds of disease states, including cancer, and that's affecting longevity. So now their parents are outliving them. That How is that possible with all the tools we have with AI and emergency care and all these hard-hitting heavy drugs that are supposed to reverse this, that, and the other, and somehow our kids are more compromised than ever.
Suicide is the
That's
leading cause of death for children and teenagers.
what is.
Suicide.
Yeah, and that's okay, so that's all part of this conversation, right? Again, it's we have to have the conversation with these kids about doing more for themselves. And a lot of it is relatively easy to do, easy to sustain, and manageable. So as an example, getting outside, getting fresh air, getting grounding, whether it's, the best grounding is on the beach. I realize not everybody has a beach, but sand, dirt, grass. I've even sent people to baseball fields, like, just take your shoes off and walk the bases. You know, anything like that that they can start doing is going to help reverse the sympathetic response in the body, which I'm sure you understand. The sympathetic response in the body is where the body's in fight or flight. Okay. And so staying in fight or flight is just going to exacerbate any disease state that these kids have. And we know that the child is always going to absorb the stress of the house, right? So if dad comes home angry after a long day, or mom and dad are fighting, that stress level is then absorbed by the children. And now they're put into a sympathetic mode to which they feel they can't get out. So now enter whatever disease state you want to have, which essentially comes in the flavor of whatever weakness that child already has in the body. It now starts to take a foothold and become a disease. So to your point, these two things are intimately connected, right? The mental and the physical health. One is going to affect the other. The good news is one can also reverse the other. And again, that's part of the definitional functional medicine. You don't talk about the body over here and only talk about the physical aspects of the body. That is a fool's errand. The body is all kinds of spiritual and emotional aspects as well. And if we can acknowledge them together, now you're starting to reverse those disease states. And so these are some of the things that these kids can do on their own, right? Listening to what their body is telling them, like what you were saying, what they need, and starting to become their own problem solvers, and holding their parents accountable. Okay, so knowing when they need a reset, knowing when they need to see Dr. Ziya again. I know I need to go back and have another treatment. I know I need acupuncture again. I feel really good when I'm there, and for a couple weeks after, but then I know when it's been too long. So helping them understand how to listen to their body is also a gift that we can give them. And again, that's where the natural remedies come in, because when we're giving them solutions that are just shut up, just numb the body, take this and it will stop talking to you, that starts to bear fruit for problems, again, either physical or mental. Any opportunity we have to listen to our body is an opportunity for us to adjust something, right? Whether it's get grounding, hydration. I mean, I talk to my patients about clean water for 20 minutes because what's the most pervasive thing that we have access to all day, every day?
Yeah.
It's water. So imagine if you're drinking toxic water all day and you're making your food with it, you're brushing your teeth, you're washing your body, you're drinking it. That's why I always tell my parents, I can't do much for you if you don't change your water system, because everything that we do is going to be a step forward and then a step back, a step forward and then a step back. That is how poison our water system is. So again, it's going back to the basic things, just getting the cleanest water first, and then adding all the other natural elements. The body really doesn't want to have all these big, sexy drugs and solutions. It really doesn't. But you know what it's craving, Fallon? How about clean water?
Yeah, just
Water
simple things.
without statins and antidepressants that have dissolved in there because they're seeping through the soil. What about pesticides and GMO? People are like, well, I can't afford organic. I'm like, you can't afford not to have organic, because even organic has some of the residue from what's in the environment.
The average
And
apple I saw is in the grocery store is a year old. And I was like, what is happening here?
yeah, I did a talk about that actually like 4 years ago at a farm. And I'm like, I may be the first doctor to tell you this, but eating an apple a day is not going to keep any doctor away. By the time you get that waxy sugar pill in, you're getting almost the same amount of nutrition as you would having Fruit Loops. And people were not happy, but I explained to them basically
Yeah.
exactly what you did when it takes, I mean, unless you have a farm in your backyard, a tree growing apples, and you're out there plucking it and eating it real time, save your time. I used to get apples by the bag at Costco for my kids. And I don't think an apple has entered this house for, I don't know, 10 years or longer. But again, those are the assumptions and the stories and the things that we hear in the background of, oh, that's healthy. And that's part of what my training is about, the nuances of nutrition. Fruit is not fruit. And again, this was, our grandparents, it was a lot simpler, Fallon. Yeah, fruit was fruit. Dirt was dirt, water was water. And it's a lot more challenging right now. And the reason is every system we have is corrupt. And I can, give you all kinds of references and books for people to read. This is not just Dr. Ziya's opinion. Multiple studies, multiple doctors have written books, many of them after they retired. Interesting.
Yeah. So they can, if they die, at least
so they can speak freely.
They can have some fun.
Yep, exactly. And a lot of these doctors have regret now. Thankfully, I'm not in their company, because they gave those patients very limited advice, and they didn't tell them about these solutions that they have that are, quite ubiquitous. So those are the kinds of things that we may or may not see a relief in the short term from our government. Again, I'm excited and hopeful about it, but we have to take steps today to make those choices in our own home, because of the cumulative effect of not doing that. That's what's making our kids sick. Nugget number 3 for parents to take away today. It's a lot simpler than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Why does my kid have ulcerative colitis? Why is my kid always sick in school? The simple reason is all of what I just said. What this water is toxic. So it's not like, oh, my kid has got this sentence, right? This health sentence that they're going to live for the rest of their life, having to live, 2 feet from a toilet. I mean, can you imagine as an 8-year-old getting that diagnosed? That's unheard of. This is unheard of.
Absolutely crazy.
But my nugget number 3 is that it's not like we got to do all this. I mean, yes, of course, if parents want to do all the testing, yeah, go shell out $2,000. We can do all kinds of testing. Absolutely. But I always say, if you're asking my opinion, let's clean out this stuff first, because guess what? These are things that you're going to have to do anyway. Are you going to opt out of drinking water? No, you're going to have to drink water. So you might as well drink clean water.
Yeah.
Are you going to opt out of nutritional choices? No, because you're going to eat on average 21 times a week. That makes me say, maybe I should make some more intentional choices. And that's where we should spend our time, money, and energy versus, well, why does my kid have this? What testing should we do? Let's go down that path, which ultimately is going to just lead to more drugs and no way out. And then, as you know, now I'm taking something and that's caused side effects for something else. And now I got to take something for the side effects. And if the mental and anxiety portion hasn't entered the child's life at this point, it's coming. Wait till puberty and adolescence. It's coming.
Yeah. And in closing, I think this is important for people to just kind of summarize. Suicide's the leading cause of death for children and teens. The second is homicide. And then third is cancer. I've only heard of one patient out of the thousands that I've seen who had adequate vitamin D and iron levels. And those adults or children who commit homicide, usually a homicide suicide, almost every single one of them is on an SSRI medication at the time of that. So just to kind of give you a big roundabout thing, because I think most people hear that and they fall out their chair, and I'm like, we need to make sure people understand the scope of what this means and what it means to put a pill in your body.
Yep.
But
and that vitamin D, I mean, nutritionally, parents, again, they're doing their best, but they're not. If you're going to a supermarket, which I always tell my patients, stop going to a supermarket, go to a farm.
Yeah.
Go to a farm. It's minimally processed. You're supporting farmers. By the way, did you know that farmers have increased suicide 350%? So also created a lot of problems for our farmers because they're getting squeezed, which are the real healers in this story, because that's where we're getting real food from.
Right.
They're not making Cheetos on a production line, right? They're harvesting and slaughtering fresh animal meat for you to consume that's been untainted and unadulterated. And now your iron levels are going to be up at a sustainable level for the child to grow and thrive. And then, and same thing with vitamin D. Our kids are not getting enough vitamin D. A couple of reasons. They're not going outside. We don't, like, the world is unsafe, so nobody goes outside, nobody plays outside. So now we're not getting enough vitamin D. And you know that the best way to get vitamin D is by going outside and getting in the sun. However, there are some people that live in Canada and points north where they don't have access to the sun like I do here in South Florida. So then plan B, not that you should ever avoid going outside for the aforementioned reason, but plan B is that you've got to supplement to get those vitamin D levels up to a protective level. And what parents end up doing, sadly, again, because this is just standard procedure, is, yeah, I'm going to put Johnny on a multivitamin. So I have the parents send me a photo of the label of the multivitamin that this child is taking. Well, first of all, I don't prescribe multivitamins for anybody. Why? Because when you're trying to pack 100 things, Fallon, into a little capsule, or for kids, it's back to a gummy. It's going to have some sugar in it. It's going to have some wax on it, some food coloring. Oh, yay, another source of food coloring. That's what our kids need. Everything that's listed on there is got such subpar values. It's not conferring any health benefit.
Right.
So I'm like, listen, first of all, Dr. Ziya does not like what your child is taking. I would prefer that you throw it away, which is sad because then it ends up in the water system, right? Whatever. There's only so much that we can do.
Right.
So alternatively, let's identify what your child's complaints are, what we do need to dial up in their vitamins and minerals, and make sure that is at an adequate level for healing. Now things start to shift, because if the child needs vitamin D, to get the amount of vitamin D to make that health benefit, both in their GI and the brain and the mindset, so that the child feels good and strong about themselves, in addition to bone health and brain health and all the other things that vitamin D does, and also causes, it also prevents 4 kinds of cancer. Can't say enough about vitamin D. Now the child would have to take, an entire bottle of gummies to get what they need.
Exactly.
So now we're having a completely different conversation. And what's interesting is some of these patients of mine are doctors themselves. And they're hearing this for the first time. So what does that tell you on the nutritional aspect of it? They're not getting trained. They don't know. So I think this is a conversation that we need to maybe have a part 2.
Always.
Because I think there's a lot there. And I think once you put this up, there may be some comments and questions for further inspection, or maybe a deeper dive on some of the other things that parents can do. But at the very minimum, it's ask questions, earning trust, and establishing a relationship is always worthwhile. And zoom out and go with the impacts of daily choices and things that you do every day, that you could and should do every single day, not just I'm going to pop a pill. popping a pill does not confer health, but the accumulation of choices of nutritional vitamins, minerals, clean water, those are the kinds of things that can and do. And then we can watch these kids break through this longevity barrier and then go into the triple digits as they should. And that would make me really happy.
Me too. Celebrating a 111 birthday.
Can you imagine?
Cannot wait.
Yep,
A whole new
absolutely.
take on angel numbers, guys.
Absolutely. And these are real goals. This is not, ridiculous
No, we're designed to be in our
outliers.
120s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We got to get out of our own way, right?
Mhm.
Yep, we can do so much more for ourselves. So this gives us hope. Let's revisit this because we need to be looking out for our kids, and our parents are busy and tired, and we want to support them too. So maybe in part 2, we'll talk about some ways that we can do that for our parents as well.
Absolutely. So please leave comments, fill out the submit a podcast topic form, DM me or Dr. Z on Instagram.
Yep, let's do it.
We want to do a part 2 and it serve you in the highest and best way. So please let us know what you would like to hear more of. And I will put Dr. Ziya's Instagram and website below so you can learn more about her amazing services and just her amazing wisdom and insight. I love you so much. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wish everyone the greatest gift in this holiday season, and that does not come under a tree. It is the gift of our health.
100%. And I love that analogy of the Christmas list, sending it right to Mr. Kennedy.
Absolutely. Why not? Why not? Let's all put it out in the consciousness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. It's a growing tribe and you know it.
100%. Thank you all so much for being here. Please share with a friend who would find this information valuable, and we will see you next time.
All right. Thank you so much.